British Columbia, 8 teenagers stand trial for the beating and murder of Reena Virk. 6 young girls are charged with aggravated assault. Warren Glowatski and Kelly Ellard are charged with murder. People around the world await the results. The assault case is airtight and should be over quickly. The prosecutors have evidence, eyewitnesses, and confessions. The girls are charged under the Youth Criminal Justice Act. They all plead guilty and are sentenced to between 6 months and a year in jail. Warren and Kelly are tried as adults. Both appealed the decisions, but the appeals are rejected. There are no witnesses to the murder. No one saw Kelly or Warren drag Reena towards the river and drown her. Crown Attorney Stan Lowe is looking for concrete evidence that will put the suspects at the scene of the crime. Could water have washed away the incriminating evidence? The first piece of evidence is the pair of jeans that Warren was wearing the night in question. Will they put him at the scene of the crime?
He was wearing white jeans. He had a girlfriend at the time. And as I mentioned, he had one of the witnesses that was sleeping over at his house. Both the girlfriend and the witness described as about a dime size or quarter size, what they thought was blood stain on his jeans. And he took his jeans and his socks and he washed them. He actually asked for instructions how to bleach the spot out of his pants. When we got the jeans later on, we were able to find the mark, but we're unable to trace it back to actually being blood, and that's because of the bleach that was used. He didn't want to be tied to that at all. He knew there was evidence there, and he did everything he could to get rid of that evidence.
The next pieces of evidence are the shoes worn by the accused. Each pair is placed in individual exhibit bags. Scott Green examines the shoes at the RCMP forensic lab. He notices something strange.
What I found later was those shoes, albeit they appeared to be dry when they went in the bag, they started to sweat and water leached out of those shoes and formed in the bottom of those bags. That didn't happen with any of the other shoes that we seized. And my theory today is that those were the same shoes that those 2 suspects were wearing the night of the murder. They got soaking wet, and they never completely dried out.
The forensic analysis was deemed inconclusive. It was not strong enough to place them at the scene of the crime. The third piece of evidence is the pair of jeans recovered downstream of the victim. Forensic analysis found no DNA evidence to put Reena in the jeans. The fourth piece of evidence is the jacket found near the Craigflower Bridge.
The jacket had its own interesting story. It was taken from the girl. It was folded up and put down. A person coming by on a bicycle found the jacket, thought it might belong to a friend of theirs. They picked up the jacket, saw blood on the jacket, and they took it home and washed it.
The Crown Attorney knows that without concrete evidence, it will be nearly impossible to place the suspects at the scene. Although Warren has made many confessions, Kelly has denied everything. Warren goes to trial first, charged with second-degree murder. From the beginning, Warren looks vulnerable.
He looked young, small, nervous, apprehensive.
Prosecutor Stan Lowe begins with a powerful opening statement. 3 crossed the bridge. Only 2 came back. Warren admits to crossing the bridge with Kelly and catching up with Reena. It's 1 point for the Crown.
I heard a very generalized, antiseptic version of events, which shifted blame from himself towards Kelly Ellard. And he portrayed himself as a person who was trying to stop her by asking her to stop no less than 3 times. But what he did was minimize his involvement. No detail. And it was completely devoid of any descriptors of the victim during the course of the incident.
In cross-examination, Stan Lowe questions Warren about the events that night, moment by moment, but not in chronological order. He's counting on this tactic to throw Warren off balance.
He did not discuss what his motivation was, so I took him there. He spoke in general terms of the events that occurred, but I took him through each one. I queried him as to what he was thinking at the time, what was going on, what did he expect to happen? Why would he assist in taking her shoes and jacket? He didn't know. On questions that probed into his actions, which I say speak louder than words, he didn't have a reasonable answer.
The trial lasts a month. The judge delivers a lengthy judgment. Up until his final word, it's impossible to predict what the verdict will be. Guilty.
The mandatory sentence at that time was a life sentence with no eligibility for parole for 7 years.
Warren was 15 years old at the time of the crime, 17 when he was sentenced to life in prison. The lawyers believed that Warren's conviction would help with Kelly's prosecution, or so everyone thought. In fact, the crime has provoked such outrage in Victoria that Kelly's lawyers have requested that her trial be moved to Vancouver, 150 kilometers away. After 2 years of delays, Kelly Ellard finally gets her day in court. She is admitted to being part of the first beating, but to nothing more. Kelly's lawyer emphasizes that nothing puts his client at the scene of the crime. No DNA, no fingerprints, nothing. He claims, quite simply, that Warren lied. Regardless, Kelly Ellard is found guilty and sentenced. Her lawyer immediately appeals. 5 months later, Kelly is released. Catherine Murray, a colleague of Stan Lowe, has been following the trial.
The cases that I was working on were the Crip Street Gang cases when we heard about the appeal. And I immediately phoned my office and said, I really want to do that Ellard case. Stan was involved in another murder trial, and I ended up taking it. This was a horrific crime. It just terrified the people of Victoria. For prosecutors, that's just the ultimate challenge. It really matters.
While preparing herself for the trial, Catherine Murray learns that the jacket Kelly wore the night of the crime was seized during a search.
It had what looked to be dried salt stains on the jacket, almost up to where the waist would be and up the arms a little bit.
Robert Groves at the RCMP laboratory in Vancouver examines the stains on Kelly's jacket. He asks for a water sample from the river to be used for comparison.
I wanted to try to replicate what would happen if this particular garment, not a garment similar to it, but this identical garment was in contact with seawater. What happens? So the collar was dipped, the water wicked up into the fabric. You could see it gradually soak up into it. When I felt that I had enough transferred, I removed the collar from the liquid and let the jacket dry. Once it dried, I was able to see a similar pattern of this random line of white material in the area where the collar had been dipped. And all I ended up finding basically was the sodium and the chlorine. So I was able to basically solve the puzzle to some degree that the jacket certainly could have been in contact with seawater. And because the elements that I found on my test area were indistinguishable from the elements I found from the questioned area.
The evidence was not sufficient to put Kelly at the scene of the crime. However, Catherine Murray has an idea of how the jacket might still be put to good use. Murray develops another tactic. She asks Warren to testify at Kelly's second trial.
Warren, by this time, was serving his sentence, and he was just working on himself. He was getting involved in all sorts of programs, taking counseling.
Warren agrees to testify. 7 years after the crime, Kelly Ellard's second trial begins. This time, Kelly will have to face Warren for the first time since their arrest.
Her demeanor was interesting. In direct examination by her lawyer, she was one way, and then in cross-examination, she kinda turned. And she kept telling me to hurry up. I was wasting her time. She'd cry. She'd deny over and over. At one point she said, no matter what you say, the answer's no. It was kind of an interesting examination. Warren told a very compelling story. He told how he and Kelly then started attacking the victim, beating her, punching her, how she fell to the ground. They started kicking her, stomping on her, actually physically getting on her, stomping up and down on her until she stopped moving, clearly unconscious. How Kelly then took one of the victim's feet, he took the other, and how they started to drag her towards the water. How once they got to the water's edge, he stopped. And he watched as Kelly dragged the victim into the water up to about her waist. And then how Kelly held the victim's head underwater until she stopped moving. He then told us how the victim was floating.
At the end of Kelly's cross-examination, Catherine Murray pulls out the jacket and shows it to Kelly. The courtroom is shocked by Kelly's reaction.
I just held it up and I said, the jacket tells the story, doesn't it? And she sort of broke down and said, you've got what you wanted. I'm going to be convicted. I'm going to be in jail for the rest of my life. Does that make you happy? Words to that effect.
The jury's verdict? A bombshell.
After 5 days of deliberations, Ellard number 2 resulted in a hung jury. 11 guilty and 1 not guilty. When that happened, we immediately got on the phone and we started phoning the witnesses, told them, and they said they'd be there for us again. So we started up again and did Ellard 3. Warren came through again, and Kelly was found guilty. Murder, second-degree murder.
Kelly Ellard appeals yet again, but in 2009, her conviction is reinstated, putting an end to a legal case that spanned more than a decade. In 2007, after his apology to the Virk family, Warren Glowatski is granted day parole.
I don't think this girl died in vain. Her legacy has accomplished a lot. This made international news at the time. And what it did is it brought the issue of youth violence to the forefront, not just in this city or in this province, but right across the country. And it was significant.
Warren and Kelly believed that water would hide their secrets, but that was not the case. For Reena Virk, justice has been served.